And welcome back to TL Talks podcast. I am TL. Good to have you. Um, First segment of my podcast is called the Thought of the Day. Thought of the day for this month is that you can only judge your past if you don't like where you currently are. So think about that. Um, Things happen in life, good and bad, and some people feel bad about the past. Some people dwell in the past. Some people have a lot of regret. But if those things didn't happen, you can make the argument that you wouldn't be where you currently are. Everything that happens has a ripple effect and leads you to the point where you're at currently in life. So if you like where you are currently, believe it or not, all those things had to happen. And that's just the reality of how life goes. So I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. And my therapist shared that with me. And so I wanted to share it with you guys. So just keep that in mind. You can only judge your past if you don't like where you currently are, if that makes sense. Next segment is called If I Were President. I am not the president of the United States, nor will I ever attempt to be. But I think it's fun just to throw it out there. What I would do if I was president. So for this month, what I would do if I was president is I would focus on equality for women. Um, Obviously, a lot of things have happened over the years that have gotten us closer to equality for women. Some no-brainers like voting and you know a lot of different rights that the women should have always had, but have now. But there's still some ground to be made for that. So I think when I'm thinking about this specifically, what I'm thinking about is equality when it comes to pay. Um, Now this is tricky because you can't compare the NBA to the WNBA because the NBA brings in a lot more money and has a lot more fans. You can't compare the NFL to semi-pro women's football because the NFL is a billion or trillion-dollar business, and unfortunately, women's football um, has a money problem. So the complete opposite. So it's not really fair to compare. It's not apples to apples. It's more of apples to oranges. So with that being said, um, you can't just say, okay, because Patrick Mahomes, signed a $500 million deal, why can't this top women's athlete do the same? It's not fair because the revenue isn't the same. Okay. But what is fair is in more traditional jobs, right? Not professional sports. But if we have a job where they both work in an office, they both have the same job, but for some reason the woman is getting paid less than the man for doing the same exact work. I think that happens still. I'm not sure why, but it does. I think in those cases, if I was president, I would put into effect laws that would hold those companies accountable if they were found guilty of doing that, basically. So if there's proof shown, it's not just hearsay. If there's proof shown that men are being paid more than women for the same exact job, and you can prove it, then that company would be fined enough that it would really hurt. And I think that would change a lot of things pretty quickly. So that's what I have for if I were president. Next is called TLRantz. So it's exactly what it sounds like. Just something I feel like ranting about this month in particular. So I'm not sure if you guys have noticed, but my dog's outside barking at something. I'm not sure if you noticed, but in American society, reading comprehension is at an all-time low. Um, I mean, maybe not like 100 years ago because I wasn't alive then, but for my lifetime, it seems like it's at an all-time low. And the reason I say that is because when I'm communicating with people, I mean, in general, but specifically social media, there's so many instances where people blatantly don't read what you're saying, and their response doesn't make any sense because they didn't read it. And so it's very frustrating to me because the whole reason I post is so that you can read it and, you know, like, why would I post? I don't know. It's hard to put into words. Like if I post about something, I post it like with an intention in mind. Like I'm doing it to share, to start a conversation, to help somebody learn something, to spread positivity. Like there's always a purpose behind it, and very rarely is it something negative where I'm just trying to be a troll. Um, I'm trying to do my part of being a positive person in the world. But when I post something and people don't read it or care to read it, or the reading comprehension, just they don't care enough to do it, that really grinds my gears, because it's just like you guys know that I started the women's tackle football transfer portal. So on this transfer portal, it's very simple. You can join as a player or a coach or a GM or owner, or even as an observer. And athletes every single off season, there'll be athletes that want to leave their current team, or they're relocating, or whatever it is. So I know that's always going to happen, right? So I created this transfer portal to help players find the right team for them. Because in the past, players had to kind of figure out themselves. So they were on their own to figure out what teams are around, where they're going to be moving to, or where they currently live. And I just didn't think that was right. Like for women's football to be what it is and have a lack of funding, and players having to pay to play, I feel like that added injury to insult about the current situation. And so I was like, well, what can I do to change that or help that? And my idea was to create this page on Facebook called the Women's Tackle Football Transfer Portal. It's 2 years running now, and we've processed about 40 athletes, and helped them find a new football home. And so I'm really proud of that. It's went really, really good so far, and I don't see why that would change. Um, but my point is that on that page, I make it very clear how it works, right? Like a player will fill out their transfer portal form saying that they're a free agent. I'll receive that in my email. I'll check it out. I'll add them on Facebook as a friend so we can communicate. And then however she responds to the form, whether she says, I prefer texting as communication, so then I'll ask her for her cell number. I'll need to get pictures from her so we can put a graphic together, highlight reel if they have a highlight reel, and then that's pretty much all I need to for Mark Howie to make the graphic. He's awesome at graphics. Then we post them to the page as an announcement, and then once we post them, teams that are interested can DM me, and then if they want to communicate, reach out to that player. However, she wants to communicate. It could be text messages, Facebook DMs, email, whatever they want, whatever their preference is, whatever they're comfortable with, right? I will honor that and make sure that teams only contact her that way. But then teams are supposed to DM me for her contact information, so then they can reach out properly. Everybody's respected, and it's good to go. So that's the rules of the portal, right? Literally today, I had a guy on there saying he's interested in this player, have a reach out. I'm like, dude, this guy's been here since last year, so he's been here the whole time. I'm like, it's not the way the portal works. The whole purpose of the portal is that teams pursue players. Like, this isn't new, bro. Like, I don't understand, what I'm saying, what the disconnect is. But it's very frustrating. And I have a hard time holding my tongue because I don't think it's that hard. And for some reason, people just don't care to read. And that's very, very enraging. Let me go ahead and move on. Sorry, I took too much time on that. We're going to get into the interview soon. My interview is with Allison Cahill. Allison Cahill is a legend in the sport. She's the quarterback for the Boston Renegades, who are the best team in the WFA. Um, she's amazing. I mean, she's one of the best quarterbacks of all time in women's football. Boston Renegades are one of the best teams in women's football. They've won consecutive championships multiple years now. I think they haven't lost like it's something crazy, like 50 games in a row. They haven't lost. And so they're obviously the best team. She is obviously the best quarterback. Well, I guess it depends who you ask. But in my opinion, she's definitely one of the best quarterbacks in women's football history. And she's still playing. And so she's around my age, I think. And so that's impressive. I'm 42 years old. And so the fact that she's playing currently and is still going to play next year is super cool. I want her to play until the wheels fall off. And so hopefully she does that. But we'll get into that interview shortly. Real quick before I get into that, I coach the Denver Bandits, who are a team in the WNFC. We went 2-4 this season, made the playoffs. We got in the last playoff spot, lost to Texas in the first round. Texas, like Boston, has never lost and won the championship once again. Um, and so I kind of this Bandit season kind of didn't sit well with me because I feel like we didn't reach our potential and we kind of squandered um, the team that we had and some of the talent that we had and stuff like that. And so kind of a failure as an organization. I mean, making the playoffs is always cool, but we just could have done much better with what we had, and we didn't. And so it is what it is. Can't change the past. All you can do is learn from it and look towards the future. So that's what we're trying to do. I also coach a men's team called the Vipers, who semi-pro men's team here in Colorado. They made it to the championship of the league here in Colorado, played against the Phoenix. The Phoenix have multiple coaches and players that I know, whether they coach the Bandits or, I've been involved with semi-pro football here for almost a decade now. So I know a lot of people. They have a good team. The Greyhawks, who I had Rashad Ray on here as a guest. The Greyhawks used to be the dominant team in Colorado, but they folded last year. And so when they folded, a new team was started called the Phoenix, and the Phoenix went undefeated and won the championship. And so they have yet to lose. And we faced them in the championship. The final score was somewhere around like maybe 39-14 or something. So pretty dominant performance by them. They're well coached. They have a lot of good athletes, and there's no excuses. They just executed better, and I think the Vipers and Coach Justin will make some adjustments for next season. But for now, it is what it is. You just have to live and learn. So, without further ado, let's get into the interview. As I've already talked up Allison Cahill, she's amazing. I was super stoked that she made time for me. She said she wanted to wait till the season was over, which I respect. But we were able to spend a little bit of time together, and the interview was phenomenal. So hopefully you agree. So without further ado, here is my interview with Allison Cahill, the legend. All right. So I'd like to welcome Allison Cahill to the TL Talks podcast. Allison, I know you're a busy lady. You're all over social media now. And so thank you for fitting me into your schedule.
It sounds like an overstatement, but I'm happy to be here. Thanks for reaching out and inviting me.
Absolutely. All right. So like I said, we're going to get into a lot of stuff. I love to start with people kind of who they are as a person before we get into football, which is an obvious topic. So I know a little bit about you, Allison. I don't know if you remember me, but we've seen each other at least once because I remember when I used to be in the WFA, I'd make it a point to go to championship weekend. And there was one year where you had won the championship, and it was after the game. You had like taken your pads off, and you were wearing like a Superwoman T-shirt underneath. I like shook your hand and congratulated you. That was a lot of years ago, so maybe you don't remember that. But anyways, it's been a while since I've seen you in person, but I've admired you and your team from afar. But the first question I have for you, Allison, is kind of your background. I know a little bit about you because there was a documentary that was made about you and your team. It was really cool. So I remember that vaguely. But refresh my memory and tell me whatever you're willing to tell me about kind of like how you grew up, what sports you played, how you got into football, whatever you're willing to share, pretty much.
Sure. Well, first, thanks for being at that game and just being a general supporter of women's football. I think a lot of
Absolutely.
us stay in our little silos and be a little territorial about our teams, our leagues, whatever it may be. So anyone who broadly supports the sport and any team, working to improve the sport is greatly appreciated. I don't remember that particular moment. Those kind
Yeah,
of
it's okay.
initial
Yeah, it's okay.
post-championship moments are kind of a blur.
Yeah.
But thank you for saying that at that time and everything else. So I'm just kind of a kid from a small town called Uxbridge, Massachusetts, which is not many people have heard of. and kind of grew up and, it being a small town, not a lot going on. So you just kind of went out and played in the yard most of the day till your parents called you home for dinner. So that included kind of all sports. A lot of boys in the neighborhood, two older brothers. So, whatever the sport of the day was, we were playing it. Like a lot of people started first organized sport was soccer. It was a little bit short-lived for me, and always played football outside with the boys in the neighborhood and at recess, whatever chance I could get. And in my town, we didn't have Pop Warner. We had flag football for boys at that time, and it
Mhm.
started in fifth grade and went to eighth grade. And that was sort of your first opportunity. And then after eighth grade was high school football. So, as I mentioned, I have two older brothers, and actually, let me circle back to even before sixth grade. When I was 4 years old, so this is literal first memory in life. My older brother is 10 years older, Paul, which, he was like a god to me because of that.
Yeah.
And my parents, who are lifelong Patriots fans, my dad has been a season ticket holder for close to 40 years.
Oh, wow.
Times weren't always as good as they have been
Oh,
for the
no.
past 20.
Yeah.
He was smart enough or dumb enough to hold on to his tickets. So I started going to games when I was really young. And, if the Patriots were playing, it'd be on the TV in the family room. So
Yeah.
this particular day, my parents had some folks over for the game. And while it was going on, again, 4 years old, I snuck away, and I knew my brother's equipment was in the laundry room. So I went over and like put on his helmet and shoulder pads and just walked back into the room, waiting to be noticed and, recognized as a football player. Here I am in helmet and shoulder pads.
Yeah.
And of course, all the adults started laughing when they saw me because, I was a little pipsqueak in my brother's adult pads. And so I burst into tears because I wanted to be taken seriously as a football player. So my mom had to take me to the side and explain, they weren't laughing at me or what I wanted to be or do. Just the sight of a little girl in grown
Oversized
man's
pads.
pads is,
Yeah.
yeah, kind of. So it's been my dream since I was 4 years old,
Mm.
and wasn't able to play in any organized flag football league, which the younger of the two older brothers was playing in at the time. So
Mm.
I would go to all his practices and just wish I could be out there. I'd be on the side, like mimicking all the drills and stuff. And in my brother's eighth grade year, which I would have been six, my dad was talking to the coach at the time, and they were just talking about the team and whatever. And I think the previous year's quarterback had graduated or gone on to high school football. And so the coach was like, I don't know who's going to play quarterback this year. And my dad was like, well, have you seen Allison throw? So he's like, no, I haven't. So I just started throwing, and I think she would want to play. And, my parents talked it over between the two of them, like, is this a good idea? She'd be the only girl in the league. And then kind of got permission from the guy who ran the league, who happened to be our next door neighbor, small town stuff, right? And he said it would be okay. I'm not sure how much of a choice he had. And so I joined my brother's team and started playing. And that was sixth grade, played up until eighth grade. My team ended up winning the championship. The last 2 years, we were kind of stacked, had all the biggest, strongest boys. But I
Yeah.
played quarterback and had a great time doing it, but knew once high school rolled around and the boys started growing, and it just wasn't a smart decision. So I focused on basketball, which was my sport through high school, and then eventually found my way back to football through women's football
Mm.
after I graduated college. So
Very cool. What do you do? Do you have a 9 to 5? What do you do for a career?
I do, yes. I'm a personal trainer.
Okay, very cool. Very cool. So I I mean, we have a lot to talk about. I have a long list of questions for you. So I guess based on what you just told me, grew up a Patriots fan. Your dad's been a season ticket holder for 40 years. He's been there since the days where they weren't so good. Which I could well, I'm a diehard Browns fan, so I can relate to the days when they weren't so
Yes.
good, but we're still working on, being
Yeah.
so we'll see this year. Um, but yeah, that's pretty cool. So you played for 2 years with the boys, and you were a quarterback on a pretty stacked team, won two championships. Do you remember that? Like, this isn't an age diss, but like how freshly do you remember like how that was? Like, was it like intimidating because they were boys, or were you just like game on, like you know what I mean, like no fear at all? Or how was your? Because you're also younger, right? So you're like that stage of life is different than who you are now, obviously.
Yeah, it was a tradition because I had been playing in the neighborhood and at recess with those same kids. Like I said, small town type of place
Yeah,
where you start kindergarten with these kids and you go all the way through senior year.
yeah,
Um, and it was normal to them, it was normal to me, and it was more maybe the parents, specifically the dads, that took some issue here and there. I mean, not a lot was said openly, but I think because I was pretty good, and my team was really good, and we were winning and beating those dads' sons teams.
hmm
Um, I remember one game when I started playing quarterback, during a timeout, and I think my team was having some success, and the coach was like, she wants to be out here like one of the guys, go treat her like one and go get her. And I just remember being like, yeah, okay, like I'm out here, like don't treat me any different. You could try to get my
yeah,
flag and have to go through my whole line to do it, but
yeah.
um, and to my peers, not a big deal. It's like anything, right? If you can compete and hold your own, you're going to get the respect. Especially like you said, when you're kids, you don't have these preconceived notions necessarily that we form later in life as adults. So I don't remember
Mhm.
being particularly intimidated. I was just psyched. Like, I've been waiting for this moment in an organized way since I was 4 years old. And, that's a long time in the life of a kid from 4 years old to sixth grade when I finally get to start playing.
Mhm.
So I loved every practice. I loved every game, every moment, putting on the gear, being there with my teammates. And yeah, just nothing but fond memories about that for sure.
That's awesome. So you said you kind of switched over to basketball once you got into high school and played that until you graduated. Were you a guard, I assume? Um, Nothing against your height, but I'm assuming you're a guard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Safe assumption. Yes, yes. And sort of probably skill wise, more of a natural, not a great ball handler. But based on height and whatever the team needed at times, I would play point guard. But
Gotcha.
yeah, it's kind of back and forth between the one and two in high school and college.
Gotcha. Did you went to college? I assume you went to college for what you do for a career. So in college you played basketball also?
I did, yes. Yeah, I played at Princeton and we did not have a lot of success. It's a very good program now. I would try to take credit for, laying the foundation, but I don't really think I can. But still a great experience, 4 years of Division I basketball. I loved basketball. It was, my second love, but the sport that I really get to play an organized level from an early age on like football and knew that there was a path for me there. Um,
Mhm.
and was lucky enough to do well enough in high school to get like just enough attention to parlay that into a 4 year career in college, but not a lot to report from the championship front or even much individual success. I wouldn't say, but I'd say that I'm a better football player than I ever was a basketball player.
I can kind of relate to that. I didn't go to a D1 school. I went to a D3 school in Ohio. I'm from Northeast Ohio, and I played football there at Heidelberg, which is a D3 school that plays in the same division as Mount Union, which like wins every D3
Yes.
championship. And we were bad. Like we were one of the worst teams in the conference when I was there, and now we're a very good team. So like Princeton, they've come full circle, which is awesome for
Take
them.
credit
But
for it, Terry. You
yeah,
laid the groundwork.
I laid the groundwork. Yeah. Okay, so we'll move on to football details. So you got into football. So you played football for 2 years and you switched to basketball. And then when you were done with college, um, like I assume you moved home and got into your career. Like, did you sign like try out for the Boston militia or like how exactly? Because I know that obviously you've been the quarterback for the Renegades since their inception, and we know that that team was the militia before that. Um, so actually don't know like if you played for anybody besides those two teams. But I also am interested how you like got into it. You know what I'm saying? I know you always wanted to play football, but everybody has a different origin story. So
Yeah, so I heard about women's football my senior year of college. My roommate at the
okay.
time and former basketball teammate was from Providence,
Mhm.
and her mom knew the woman who had founded one of the original teams in the New England area called the New England Storm. So as soon as she told me about it, because we would like on warm spring days, we'd go out in the quad or whatever and like toss the football around, and I would
Yeah,
go to the men's game and everything. And so, it was no secret that I loved football. So
yeah.
when my friend told me this, I was like, jumped on the internet right away and saw, the information for the New England Storm and that there were going to be tryouts in April. So
Mm,
basketball had ended and I was due to go home for Easter weekend. It timed up with that. So I was like, great, I'll go home, have Easter with the family, go to this
mm,
tryout and we'll see what happens. And you fill out the intake paperwork, a little bit about your athletic history, what positions you might want to play. So I just filled out any position that a person in skill set, would fill out: defensive back, running back, wide receiver, quarterback, and went to the tryout. Um, and like most tryouts, kind of everybody's pretty much lumped together initially. Everybody goes through the same drills and agility,
mhm.
change of direction, etc. And then at
Yeah,
the end, they're like, okay, anybody who thinks they want to play quarterback, come on over and start throwing. So there were maybe three or four of us.
yeah,
Um, and nobody else really was what I would call competent or like good natural at,
yeah, yeah.
throwing it.
They're just trying it. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Maybe played softball or something. And
yeah.
so the owner at the time, who was quite a big personality, she was just like, you're the quarterback, essentially. And so I went back to college, spoiler alert, everybody makes the team. So I made the team. Um, Graduated, must have been May or something, moved home. I wasn't a personal trainer yet. I was actually teaching at my old high school and doing a little bit of coaching for the coaches that I had played for in basketball and softball.
Mhm.
And was living at home at the time and driving to and from Boston, like the Medford area. It's kind of just outside of Boston, an hour back and forth to practice. Psyched, like this is real. I can't believe it. Helmet, shoulder pads,
Mm.
all women, full contact games. We're traveling to other states. Like, are you kidding me? I can't believe this is real.
You were so stoked. Yeah.
And yeah, yeah. And we had about as much success as my Princeton basketball team did, just hitting kills
Per-
left and right. But,
Perfect. Perfect.
waking up on Sundays, just like looking at all my bruises, like feeling myself off the bed. Why is my neck so sore? Just loving everything about it.
Mm.
So like the Patriots, I guess, Boston women's football was not always as successful as, we've turned out to be. So we took our lumps and that team just lasted 1 year. The story in women's football, a lot of turnover at every level,
Yeah.
organization and player
Unfortunately.
wise. So after that, it became the mass mutiny, which I think I played for 3 years
Hmm.
and then eventually merged with another local team to form the militia, which is, really when we started to get it together and build the program that,
Okay.
yeah, kind of ultimately
So there was a storm for 1 year and a mutiny for
is
3 years.
2003.
2003.
Yep.
Oh, wow.
And I think there was like a 1 year gap because that first New England storm was actually a late summer into fall season. And then, it was one of those things we didn't know if we were going to have a team another year. So I did jump right to another team. So
Uh-huh.
didn't play that following spring, which I think is when their season was typical for what we know as women's football now, the spring summer season. So I
Mm.
think it was probably actually 2004 or five to check my math when I
Interesting.
started with the mutiny. Yeah.
So how many years was were you with the militia?
the whole time. So I think militia started in 2007, ended in 2014.
Oh wow, 7 years.
Yeah.
Dang. And then
You have to check with the
Renegade.
backseat coach on that. He's the encyclopedia.
I have his contact information. I'm gonna have to check.
Yes, I know you
Um,
do.
so Renegades have been around for 9 years then, or 8 years?
2015, yep, was the first year.
So eight
And of
years.
course, we missed the 2020 season, but we count that. So
Yeah, time
we
flies,
tried. We
man.
started
Yeah,
20
when I got
years.
into women's football, the militia were still around. So I was in women's football when you guys transitioned from the militia to the Renegades, and I remember this actually. I remember like being worried about it because just like the Chicago Force, like um, really good women's teams aren't common. No diss to anybody else, but just like operating at a very high level and being a high quality team that has their shit together. It just isn't. There's not a lot of them. So because the Chicago Force were one of those, and because I knew Boston Militia was also one of those, I was like, man, I hope they don't like not figure it out because how much would that suck? You know what I mean? Because we got so used to um, Boston and Pittsburgh and DC and like this nice Eastern rivalry. You know what I mean? Like where you could always guarantee these handful of teams were going to be good. They're going to battle each other. So if Boston went away, that would be really sad for the sport. And so I was happy to see the Renegades were formed. Then I was kind of like I remember like being cautiously optimistic because I was like, okay, another team was formed in Boston, great. Um, I think I know the owner, Molly Goodwin, awesome. But can they be as good as the militia, if not better? I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, who knows? Like, are certain players, like they're going to stay with the owner that no longer is the owner? You never know like the actual intricacies of each team. So I always get a little bit nervous when there's a rebranding because you just never know. Like, it could be a watered down version of what they used to be, or they could be as good, if not better. And I think you guys are better. So I have nothing but respect for your team. That's actually the next question I had for you about Boston. So, like, one of my questions for you, and one of the most important questions I had for you, is what do you think sets Boston apart? Because I am a legit fan of women's football. Like um I mean I'm in the WNFC, so obviously I pay more attention to them because I play them. But I keep my pulse on the sport, right? I watch as many games as I can. I keep track of scores and the amount of dominance you guys have had um, for as long as you have had it is pretty crazy. It's very interesting to me that like you guys have won a whole bunch of games in a row and had consecutive championships, and then Texas also has done the same thing in a different league. And so it's like this big like elephant in the room. You know what I mean? That like, okay, there's this dominant team in the WFA that never loses. There's this dominant team in the WNFC that never loses. And of course, everybody wants to see you guys play, see who would win. And so obviously that's just it's never going to go away until it happens, I guess. But I guess my question for you, Allison, is from your perspective, what sets Boston apart from other teams? From what I've heard, your coaching is next level and arguably the best in the sport. But what would you say from your perspective?
I think I would lump consistency and continuity together
Okay.
and hard work. Like that's not exciting to people,
Right. Not a
but it's the
flashy answer.
truth.
Yeah.
Having had a front row seat to it for 20 years, um, we touched a little bit on the turnover in the sport, just kind of the nature of the beast. It's really hard to do this for a long time
Yeah.
with our competing commitments. It's hard to get good coaches to come into the sport that have
Yeah.
enough of an open mind and love it enough to see past the perceived gender issue.
Yeah.
And, you know, Coach Vern, our offensive coordinator, I think he said after this championship, he's been with us for 15 years. And he is among a group of players and coaches. I think there's 5 of us who've been on board for all 8 championships, going back from militia to renegades.
Wow.
And you can't really quantify that consistency, I don't think. Quality and consistency. Right. If
Yeah.
he was a bum coach, you'd be like, oh my God, get this guy again. But this man played at Florida State for Bobby Bowden. He played in the pros for Pete Carroll and, in the NFL period. I don't care, who your coach was
Yeah.
at the time. Like that is the top of the sport in the whole world.
Mhm.
And, has coached at the college level, has coached at the high school level, and has been with us, like I said, for 15 years. Some years on defense, but recently, since I think 2016, he's been our offensive coordinator. And speaking for myself, what he's done for my career as a quarterback, and I don't think that, I'm the exception here. What he's done for players on an individual level and a collective unit is second to none. And he's a legend in the sport. As much as any of us can be legends in the traditional sense of the word as being household names, like none of us are, of course. But
Yeah.
for people who know the sport and the people in it, Coach
Mhm.
Fern Crawford to me uh, belongs on that Mount Rushmore. He has never once coached us like women, whatever that might mean to someone. He's never coached down to us. I feel like every year he raises his level. This man is like obsessed with football. Pretty much coaches year round because he coaches high school boys football, does
Mhm.
camps and clinics, and never stops learning, never stops trying to get better. And in a text exchange I had with him, must have been around his birthday, and I was just trying to express my gratitude to him. He
Yeah.
said something to the effect of, no matter what I have going on in life that is difficult, family stuff, health stuff, anything, I know when I get to practice, there's going to be 50 women who are just dying to learn and get better. I don't want to be the one to let you guys down.
Mm.
And I think all of us have sort of risen to that. It's almost like we're trying to one up each other, like who can work the hardest, who can find another lever to pull the next year, something that, we didn't do the year before. And I think we do a good job of sticking to our core values of what has gotten us to this point,
Mhm.
but not being complacent and trying to continue to push on both an individual and an organizational level to continue to raise the standard. And we don't shy from that. I think that's not something that we shrink from or, is a source of stress or, pressure. I think it's enticing to us. I want to see how far we can push this team and by extension the sport. Um, we kind of carry that torch and I think we as best we can uphold that for not just our team, but for everyone.
Mm. I think you're right. If I didn't agree with what you just said, I would call you out for it. But yeah, I mean, you guys kind of do set the standard for women's football in general. I mean, obviously in our league, Texas does that same thing, and so I think the thing that we have in common is I can only speak for me and my team. I coach the Denver Bandits in WNFC, and it's common knowledge that to win a championship, you have to beat Texas. So every year you're trying to get closer to that and trying to bridge that gap because they've been dominant, just like you guys have been since the inception of the league. So I think the same way in the WFA, Boston has been dominant for quite a while now. And so teams have to be like, okay, how can we catch Boston? Right? Like, how is it more talent? Is it better coaching? Is it better culture? It's probably all the above. But there is a pretty big gap. And so since I'm such a nerd about the sport, one of the matchups I was most eager to watch was you versus St. Louis, because not that I thought St. Louis would beat you guys, but I knew they wouldn't play scared. And me and you both know that if you play scared, the game's kind of over before it started. You know what I mean? Like you can't tackle Ruth Mata in the open field and like get low and tackle, Kusanen. Like you're not going to do that if you're scared. You're just not. Like physically, you're not. So not playing scared is half the battle. And then the second half of the battle is not only coaching at a high level, but also doing it for 4 quarters. And so I knew that St. Louis had it in them to not play scared. I knew they also didn't have great numbers. And so my prediction for the game was that it would be close at halftime, and then you guys would pull away in the second half. So I made a prediction of like 35-21 Boston, and then I think the score was like 35-7 maybe. Um, and so, but I heard that St. Louis had like a dropped wide open touchdown. So if he had scored, that would have been closer to my prediction. But yeah, I guess my point is that you guys have been dominant for a while. Um, so my follow-up question, and hopefully this isn't an annoying question, but do you think that any Boston players get bored because they don't feel challenged by other teams? Like they feel challenged by their coaching staff, and you guys have a great culture of always evolving and doing better. But since most teams don't really challenge you on the field, does that ever get like, well, like our backups are in at halftime. Like here we go. Like again, it's just unfortunately most teams just can't hang. You know what I mean? That's just a reality of the sport.
The short answer is no, we don't get bored.
Good, good.
I think that the final scores can sometimes make it seem like these other teams aren't good or competent. And I don't think that that's true.
Okay.
I think, okay, we beat Tampa 69-0. Tampa has a lot of good, big, talented football players. They have a big coaching staff. They have strong ownership. We don't like look at our schedule or even look at the previous week's score if we're, playing a team a second time.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't ever think like we're just going to show up and win by a lot.
Right.
I think we have sort of found a sweet spot between confidence, like you were referring to before. I mean, you have to be supremely confident when you take the football field, or things are going to go sideways for you quick.
Yeah.
But we're humble enough to put in the work that earns you that game day confidence. Like our practice is, if we have to our standard, like a down practice on offense, we huddle as position groups and then ultimately as a full offense after every practice and kind of talk through what went well, what questions people have, what didn't go so well, what are we going to do differently next time. And if you leave a practice where we felt like we dropped the level on ourselves, it has nothing to do with who we're playing that week. Or even if we have a game for the next 2 months, if we're talking about like a January practice.
Yeah.
It's like hard to sleep that night. And if it's a Tuesday, you're like, Thursday cannot get here quick enough. Or Wednesday film, in fact, cannot get here quick enough. So we can look at what the heck we did that made it feel like we were the worst football team in America,
Yeah.
And I also think that, kind of circling back to your question about what's led to our dominance, if you want to use that term, I think work ethic is a learned skill, just like throwing, catching, blocking. I mean, I remember when I was in middle school and I was playing for, the middle school team in 7th and 8th grade basketball. I was like, man, I'm a really hard worker. And then I got to be a freshman on the varsity basketball team. And I was like, man, these juniors and seniors really work hard.
Yeah.
And then I got to college and I was like, wow, Division I college basketball is a whole nother game, And I look back at what I did at the beginning of my football career. I wasn't putting in a fraction of the work I am now, not because I was lazy, but because, like I said, I believe that work ethic is a learned skill. And you learn how to work both harder and smarter. You retain what has served you and helped you get better and achieve success. You do away with the things that you're like, well, that was a waste of my time. And you try to learn every year what you can do as an individual. And by extension, like bring that to your team, your position group, whatever it is. And that to me, like I'm a process oriented person. I think we have a lot of those people. Yeah. Like you have to love practice. We give perfect attendance awards, which is like one of the highlights of my year.
Yeah.
And so Ben Brown, our amazing GM, keeps track of everyone's attendance. And we had a 2 week rookie camp that, not all the vets were invited to. So we kind of throw that aside, and, 3 tryouts in the fall that not everybody knows when they're going to be. And so they might not be around when the dates come out, etc. So
Yeah.
outside of those things, from the start of official full team preparation, we've had 59 team practices or, mini camp type things. We had 2 of this year.
Yeah.
Like, and you play 9 games.
Yeah.
So check my math, but you practice exponentially more. And this doesn't include film sessions. This doesn't include captain's practices. This
It's a
doesn't
lot.
include unofficial player film. Like,
Right.
if you don't love football preparation, you don't love football to me,
Mm.
because well, everybody loves game day. Great. But it's what, 6 regular season games the past few years. Maybe you get 1, 2, or 3 more playoff games.
Mhm.
If that's 9 days out of a 365-day year. Like, say too that, we play games on Saturday, but we've never won a single game on Saturday. We win games on Monday film, Tuesday practice, Wednesday film, Thursday practice, Friday film, Saturday captain's practice when we don't have a game. And you can
Mm.
take Sunday to yourself, I guess, to recover. But even then, people are getting their own workouts. But again, it wasn't in 2003. We didn't watch film. People didn't even barely warm up before practice.
Mm.
You showed up for a game on Saturday and like, who are we playing? And like, figure out what defense they're running on the first snap. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a whole nother world. And we take a lot of pride in the standard that we've set. And we consider ourselves professional athletes. We
Mm.
might not have the paychecks or the endorsements to prove it, but you can't tell me that my teammates are not professional athletes. At least the ones that have been around a while. You just get some rookies that take a little bit to buy in, but
Yeah.
now we make cuts now. So if you're not putting in the work, like, you're not going to earn the jersey. So I don't remember what your original question was, but that's how I feel about. I guess it was about getting bored for games. Like, no,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
me, game
Well,
day,
yeah.
is a chance to show off the work that you
Work you
have
put
put
in.
in,
Yeah.
and yeah. So, but again, those teams are good. They have talented players. They're working hard. They just don't have all of the pieces put together yet. But someday the tables might turn, and we'll have to take a look in the mirror and figure out what we're not doing right. You know.
Mm. That's fair. I appreciate you answering that question. I know I was worried that you would find it as like an annoying question. You're like, the short answer is no, I'm not, we don't get bored of winning, or, like whatever. But I love what you said. Like you said, we don't win on Saturdays. Everything we do during the week adds up to a win. And then Saturdays just kind of, you're at that point, all the work is done. So you're just having fun and executing, and obviously usually it leads to a win. So that makes complete sense. My next question for you, Allison, is your the best opponents of your career. So go ahead and dig deep. I think we're actually around the same age, because you mentioned when you started football and after college, and I graduated in '99. So I think we're from the same era. But your whole career, close to 20 years, the best opponents you played, who sticks out to you? Um, and before you answer, I actually flew my Italian ass to Chicago to watch Boston versus Chicago in person. So I was on the sidelines. Coach Konecki let me be on the sideline for that game. Awesome game. Boston won by a small margin. So I've went out of my way in my career to go watch the best teams in person. But what would be your answer of the best opponents you've played?
Yeah. I wouldn't be able to give, well, if I really had to sit and think about it, specific defenses from specific years, but from
Yeah.
an organization standpoint, definitely those Chicago defenses were probably the toughest we've faced. I think they weren't necessarily the biggest, but they just matched up the best against us. And
Mm.
obviously were really well coached. Those games were always close with few exceptions. And, of course, they had the offense to go kind of score for us, but I, can mostly speak for their defenses. Just
Yeah.
tough, fast, smart football players
Mhm.
that presented matchup problems at kind of every level of the defense.
Mm.
The DC defenses, for sure. I mean, we had a long time rivalry with them.
Mhm.
Outcome wise, I think the percentages are skewed in our favor. We played them much more frequently than we played Chicago based on geography
Yeah, of
and,
course.
and conference.
Mhm.
But, some big hitters, just big physical defenses. But I think, you know, what Chicago maybe lacked in size, DC lacked in speed certain years.
Mhm.
And, we were able to exploit that. And then, I definitely remember a a standout butt kicking at the hands of Pittsburgh early, I believe it was our first year as the militia, where we had
Really?
had some early success. We had combined two teams in the area and, had the most like robust roster and coaching staff. So we were feeling pretty good about ourselves and then went to Pittsburgh and just got absolutely blown out of the water. But it
Wow.
was a turning point. It was like, okay, we are not where we thought we were, and we need to go back to the drawing board and do so much better at every level. And it was very much like an iron sharpens iron kind of thing, like you were talking about before, when we were all good at the same time and just, nobody was going through the regular season undefeated. Somebody was dropping a game here or there to one of those other teams. We were likely going to face each other again in the playoffs. So now you're,
Yeah.
presented with that challenge of seeing a team multiple times and trying to figure out what worked from previous games and what didn't, and how are you
Adjustment.
going to kind of, yeah, overcome that. Everybody had really well run organizations. All the ownership was solid and sound, making the right
Mhm.
decisions for their teams. Coaching staffs across the board, super invested and intelligent. And, you know, it was formative for us as an organization. Um,
It
and I
kind of
miss those battles.
it kind of needed to happen in a way, right? Because you
Mhm.
guys learned so much from
Yeah.
that.
Yep. Yep. We would not have moved forward like we did, progressively without having to go through those teams season after season. Like I said, it was usually multiple times for all of those teams. And we played DC 3 times a year on an annual basis, Um, and what they had, what I referenced before in terms of what has led to our success, they had the same things going for them. Really strong veteran core, consistent coaching and ownership, so you had not only talented athletes out there, but smart football players. And as
Mm.
you know, in the women's game, that piece of the puzzle takes much longer to develop because we're so new to it coming in. Whether you
Yeah.
start when you're 22 or you're 35, you're
Mhm.
still 1 year old as a football player. You're just a baby.
It's true.
And you see it in these teams now that have kind of undergone rebuilds. They have some great athletes over there. I would argue that we don't always have the best roster top to bottom. We're not the most impressive team walking off the bus, but we have that core veteran group. We have football IQ. We have great coaching. And then we bring in rookies that understand what's going to be asked for them and the standard that we've set. And they either rise to it or they fall off. And so
Mm.
there's sort of a kind of a self cleansing to the
Mm.
program at this point, which is great. We don't really carry dead weight. Even if somebody never sees the field, they have a role in practice on special teams, whatever it may be.
Mm.
And really everybody's contributing on some level, which is a luxury that we didn't always have, either
Yeah.
numbers wise or quality or quantity.
Mm. That's amazing. I want to know what you think of the current state of the WFA. So I've been coaching women's football for almost a decade now. I used to be the head coach of the Mile High Blaze for the first 4 years, and they fired me after one of their best seasons. And then I took a year off and then started coaching the Denver Bandits in the WNFC, who I'm currently with. So I started off independent with the Blaze. Then we joined the WFA in year 2 or 3. Um, and so I was a huge advocate of the WFA at the time. The WFA was the best league, and it wasn't close. Like IWFL, no thanks. Like it wasn't. There was no competition. And so then when OJ made the WNFC, I knew OJ, and she invited me to like this introductory meeting in Plano, Texas, where she was gonna kind of like pitch what she envisioned for the league and what she was trying to start. And I walked away from that meeting just blown away. Like I wasn't sure if she could pull it off, but like it was really impressive what she was aiming for. And now here we are, 4 years later, and she's been able to deliver on most of the things she was aiming for, which is super cool. But I want to hear like your perspective of the WFA. Like there's WFA Pro, there's WFA Division Two, Division Three, developmental. Um, there's a lot of teams in WFA, which helps because geography and money is a big problem in women's football. But what is your opinion of the league in general, where it's currently at? Because like I like the WFA because it's one of the top leagues and it has a team like Boston in it that I like watching. I like excellence wherever I can find it. But I kind of have a problem with the lack of transparency with WFA. Like, how do they select who becomes pro? You know what I mean? Like some of these teams don't seem like they're pro, and then they're losing to D2 teams or they're getting blown out by another pro team. And so the lack of transparency about those selections in pro bothers me because in a perfect world, WFA pro would really mean pro, right? Like I know there's only one Boston, but any other team that's like Boston that has strong, like you said, strong ownership, great athletes, good numbers, full coaching staff, that's the standard, right? And I would love to see that where pro really means pro. And then maybe Boston would still blow everybody out, but those teams, whenever they play somebody not named Boston, those games would be guaranteed to be competitive if that was the case. And so that's my take. I'm just some guy in Colorado, so who cares? But what is your opinion of where the WFA is at currently, as opposed to where they were in the past? Good and bad, if you're willing.
Yeah, yeah. Sure. I just don't know if I'm the best person to express strong
That's it.
opinions on this because I very much am like head down, do the
Oh
work
yeah,
of trying to be the best quarterback for the, Boston Renegades. Like
you are that
truly
way.
not a diplomatic answer. Like, um,
Yeah,
you
that's true.
know,
Yeah.
making decisions and nobody's really asking my opinion. However, as I referenced before, we've come a long way since the start of my career, which I
Yeah,
think is in part due to certain individual teams doing things the right way and also decisions being made at the league level. I certainly can't say that we were our games were live on ESPN2 back in the day
true.
and Women's Sports Network and FTF and playing our championship game at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Like, I think those are pretty undeniable indicators of progress.
For
Um,
sure.
I think that there's a lot still to be done, and I don't know how much of that is the people within the league
Hmm.
or the battles we're up against as women's football,
Mm.
right? I mean, we see other women's sports who have much broader pipelines of talent, like soccer, right? Like everybody
Yeah.
plays soccer as a kid, and there's a very clear and defined path to moving through the ranks,
Hmm.
ultimately to seeing the U.S. national team at the World Cup, right?
Hmm.
Same thing for women's basketball. And as we've seen those sports have success and those athletes in those sports, I think there's things to be learned, but I think a lot of it comes down to money. And sometimes I think that football is so beloved in this country that it actually works against us, right? Like it's so precious to people that
Yeah.
they're almost guarded about it and they don't want to share the resources. Um,
Mhm.
and frankly, I think about this with the South, and I don't know this, but
Yeah.
the South, at least in our league, has always
Mhm.
had a hard time putting together consistently good teams.
Mhm.
And in my mind, I'm like, is it because it must be so hard to get high quality coaches because high school football in the South is year round? I mean, that's a full time job. It's not like here where you're maybe a math teacher and the high school football coach. Like my understanding is those guys are very well compensated. coaches who are put on pedestals, and they either certainly wouldn't want to take a perceived step back to the women's game and teach beginners, or they
Mm,
frankly don't have the time because their coaching jobs are full time. I don't know.
mm,
So I think there's a lot of layers to kind of where our league is and why. But I think that there's a lot of well-meaning people who are working their butts off to progress things. And I think that there, like I said, are some very strong indications that that's happening. Um, but again, I'm not on any player boards or anything like
mm.
that really call into question, like, oh, so and so made this decision and they should, if it were me, I would have made the other decision,
Yeah, yeah.
I know for our ownership, they do an incredible job, and unfortunately just get more no's than yeses when it comes to, like, hey, can you show up and do the coin toss? Hey, can you sing the national anthem? Hey, can you invest X amount of dollars?
Mhm.
So like any kind of burgeoning organization or small business, you get
Mhm.
the door shut in your face more often than it's open to you, and you're invited in, and fit in fit that in the overarching narrative and reality of women's sports in the United States. And there's a lot of work to do.
Okay, so good segue. I want to ask you what you think of the WNFC. I know you're a head down lady, which I
Yeah.
respect that, but you have to have some kind of opinion about that league. And obviously, like I said, the elephant is Texas because they're the dominant team over there. You're the dominant team here. So, what do you have to say about the league from what you know, and the comparisons, I guess, of you and Texas?
Yeah, I mean, the key phrase there is from what I know. I try not to be somebody who expresses opinions on something they're not fully educated on. There's plenty of
That's
that
smart.
going on
Yeah,
in the world.
I respect that.
And I really don't know a lot about it. Everything I
Okay.
know is sort of secondhand. I've heard good things, I've heard
Mm,
bad things, but I truly mean it. Like, I already don't have anywhere near the amount of time that I would love and dream to have to be the quarterback of the Boston Renegades, right? Like, I have to have a full-time job. So I am like tunnel vision compartmentalized to the max. Like, you asked me earlier if I listened to any of your podcasts. Yes, I did. I started with Molly Goodwin because that's our
yeah,
owner. And then I listened to Coach Konecki's episode because we used to play him. I probably
yeah.
wouldn't have listened if we were still playing him. So I'd be like, I don't want to hear what this jerk has to say.
You can let it go. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And then I looked at your other episodes, and there, I don't think was anything else WFA related, or not much. But I did see the Kelly Smith one, and I was like, if we end up playing Bama, I will listen to that because it's somewhat relevant. And then I saw your Coach Q episode, and I was like, if we end up playing St. Louis, I will listen to that because it's
Yeah,
relevant to me. But like, I don't even know a lot about what goes on in Division 2 and Division 3 in our league. I don't even know a lot about what goes on with the West Coast teams until I find out who's coming out of the West that we're gonna maybe see in the championship.
gotcha.
I don't even watch other teams' offenses of teams that we're playing because it's
Right,
all, none of it serves me. It doesn't help me be a better quarterback for my team.
gotcha.
And I would have to go out of my way to watch the WNFC or read about them.
Yeah,
And it's just time, not time well spent for me. Like, we don't play them. Nothing they do really has an impact on us. And it's not like I could just turn on the TV and see them on ESPN. Like, I don't follow any of their stuff on social media. Like, I really honestly just try to limit distractions because, like I said, I'm not a professional football player as
mhm,
a full-time job.
yeah,
And any extra time, energy that I have is going to be dedicated to being the quarterback of the Boston Renegades. And I've learned that over the years that everything else has to fall by the wayside. You have to make choices. Um, but like I said, I have heard some really good things. I have heard some not so great things. I know some of the players on Texas just because of the um, somewhat incestuous world of women's football, I guess, right? people who
Yeah.
played in our league are against, on teams that we played. I
Mhm.
know they win, because I end up hearing that, but I've never watched one of their games. And it's not like a disrespect thing. It's just, it's not relevant to me.
Doesn't serve
And I
you,
don't
like you
have
said.
the time and energy for it.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. I think
But
that's
like I
fair.
said about the WFA, I think that the people are over there, I hope, are trying to do right by women's football and the players
Mhm.
and people involved. And yeah, it's great that there are, I don't know, are there teams in areas that the WFA doesn't serve? So great that other women can play that might not otherwise be able to because there's a WNFC team in their league. Um, but yeah, that's about the extent of my knowledge. And like I said, I try not to
Or-
express opinions on things
yeah,
that I
yeah.
don't know anything about.
No, I'm the same way. I don't talk about things I don't know about, so that's totally fair. Um, so I only have a handful of questions left. I appreciate you pushing through. So my next question is about St. Louis. So I told you that was one of my most anticipated games of this year. St. Louis is a really good team, well coached. I love if you listen to the Coach Q interview, I mean, I love the guy. He's obviously a very bright coach. And I feel like he does more with less, if that makes sense. Like they consistently have low numbers year in and year out, and they're like they didn't give up any points until like week 9 or something. Like what I'm saying? Like it's crazy how how disciplined they played all year, and I think it's testament to his coaching and the staff, obviously. So St. Louis, I just want to hear like from your Allison brain, right? Like you prepare for each game, each opponent's different. You're given notes and keys and certain players to maybe avoid or not avoid. How did now that it's over, you can speak freely because it doesn't matter until next season. But going into that game, how was that for you? Like how did you I shouldn't say how did your team? I want to know how you specifically, how did you view St. Louis as an opponent? Good or bad?
Oh, tons of respect for them.
Yeah,
If you remember, we played them in the regular season last year,
yeah.
and we were down at halftime 20-19.
Mhm.
And it was funny when we showed up, pregame, I get there like absurdly early and do my own crazy warm up well before the team warm up.
Yeah.
And they were kind of trickling in and they sort of lulled me to sleep a little bit because this is like pregame, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and they were doing kind of mostly a walkthrough. It seemed like in ways that I feel like teams we played in the past, like, oh, you didn't actually practice all week. This is the first time your team's been together and you're in it now. You know what I mean? Like, oh, that's not a good
Yeah.
look for you. But
Yeah.
in retrospect, what I think I was observing was they were just conserving energy because they don't have the numbers, right? And they couldn't have this kind of crazy high tempo pregame warm up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That wasn't
Like,
in their best interest. Yeah. That makes
yeah,
sense.
because they sort of very quickly, and what I'll say is it's not like I was sleeping on them going into the game because we had watched film. You could tell from film that they're a very well coached team with a ton of discipline and great football players. So
Mhm.
don't let me come across as saying that. It was just the warm up specifically. Um, and
That's kind of funny.
there was a situational thing that early on in the game, third and long, and as we often do, we called a screen pass, right? Kind of football 101. And they were sitting all over it. And I was
All right,
like,
bravo.
you
Yeah.
did yeah, you did your homework. You're
Yeah.
well coached. You listen to what your coach has told you. You play as a team, as a unit on defense. And I
Yeah.
was psyched. And yes, we pulled away in the second half, but again, judging by the final score, I think it was 49-20. Sounds like a big margin, but it was like we were psyched to have played them. And I think we were supposed to play them in the regular season in 2022. And I remember that we were looking forward to that because they had won the D2 championship, I think, the previous year, and we knew they were like an up and coming team who really had their stuff
Yeah.
together. And
Yeah.
we want to play the best teams, like 100%. So we came away from that game like, oh, this is the team in the West. And then they had that weird Massey rating. I think that they didn't have enough games on their schedule to kind of qualify for make it in the playoffs last year. But that
Yeah.
meant nothing to us. We were like, this is a team to be reckoned with coming out of the West for sure.
Mm.
So coming into this year and kind of keeping an eye on their scores and who they were playing, common opponents like Minnesota that we had played in the previous two championships are like, okay, they're back and they're even better. And this could very well be the team that comes out of the West and they backed it up for sure. And, going into the game, we knew, I mean, look, you don't have that many two-way players and end up being soft or pushovers. Like
It's
you
true.
have to be so mentally and physically tough
Yeah.
and come into the playoffs like pretty fully intact. From what I could see, I know they had some early season injuries to some key people on defense, but even so, they plugged in what I assume was younger players, and they came right up to speed. Like Coach Q, if I can call him that. I'm not trying to be
Yeah.
familiar when I've never officially met him.
Yeah.
Um, and even listening to your podcast, watching his demeanor on the sideline, very calm and composed. And I think sounds like a master of the game and communicating what he wants to his players. And they're all bought in and they're awesome. They're a great team. And I have nothing but respect for them. And yeah, I think their numbers hurt them, but I don't think they would ever use that as an excuse. Like,
Yeah.
they went 4 quarters and they were still coming at the end. Like, it never felt comfortable to us.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the Bucks holding it down, like they had that one long run, which was a super fast, shifty, good running back. Like running backs like that are going to rip one off, even against a great defense every now and then. But, it felt like our defense had control of the momentum in that battle, their offense versus our defense. And
Mhm.
then as an offense, it was just a matter of finding our footing, getting back to basics. I don't think I played particularly well, which certainly holds back the entire offense and what we're trying to do. But they're awesome, and I hope that they continue to get better because we see this in women's football, right? Like a team will be on the come up and have a really good year or two, and then life intervenes in the way that we know it can in our sport, and people drop off the roster, or coaches have to move on, and it's hard to pick up those pieces. So I hope that they continue on the trajectory that they're on. They're good for the sport, and they're good for us.
Fair enough. Um, my next question is, do you hate anybody in the sport? Do you hate any teams or players or I don't think you're a very hateful person by nature. I feel like you're like just head down, I'm going to do my job and it's not personal, but you're also a human. And so maybe you don't hate anybody, but maybe you strongly dislike somebody, a certain player or a certain team. So what would you say to that?
I do hate people, Terry. I'm not
Okay.
so
Oh,
nice. No, 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 no. It's funny. This weird thing happened. I don't know, say like 5 years ago or something.
yeah.
Because I do enjoy hating the other team. I like that. I like to
The
have
rival.
like I don't want to be friends. I don't want to talk to you on social media or
Oh,
whatever
yeah.
the heck it is.
Yeah.
And yes, I try to be a kind and friendly person outside of football, but it was like people started being nice to me and like saying nice things going through the line after the game. I was
Yeah.
like, this is weird. Like, I don't know if I like this, and I don't know if it was like I've just been around forever and I've worn people down and they're like, well, she ain't going anywhere. I might as well be collegial with her. I don't know. But I'm still trying to navigate that, I would say. And yeah, you see things on film, like, or in your game, like, dude, you really gonna have like a signature tackle celebration when one, that tackle just came after a 15-yard gain for us. So
Right.
that's
First down.
actually not a positive result for you and something
Yeah.
to be celebrated, but
Low,
okay.
low football IQ.
Yeah, man. Or, like celebrations when you're down 60-7. Like, I can't understand that mentality. And that pisses me off. Like, because it's happening with some of these teams that, we sort of referenced before that used to have a really strong veteran core, that stuff would never have flown if that veteran core was still around. Like, really individual celebrations and signs and whatnot when you haven't done anything, you haven't won anything. Like, I don't know if that's like a generational thing or what, but
It might
to
be.
me, yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
I
Maybe
don't
I'm
disagree with you
becoming
though.
an old curmudgeon, like, I understand expressing joy. Like, it's a really intense emotional sport. You put in so much work. It's physical. And sometimes, I mean, I've gotten like blackout, like celebration. What am I even doing? When emotions get the best of you. But the
Yeah.
individual stuff, when your team is not having any success, that freaking grinds my gears. Like, as an athlete, you know what I mean? Like, because to me, I could just laugh it off, like check the scoreboard, kind of
Yeah.
tells the story here. But as
Yeah.
somebody who takes a lot of pride in the work it takes to me kind of earn the right to do some of those things, like, what have you done? Like, what have you done? So
So you
it's
would,
more conceptually that kind of stuff, um,
so you
not
hate
like
that.
one person.
Gotcha. So you don't hate a person, a certain player or a team. You hate certain behaviors.
Yes,
Okay.
correct,
All right. Making
correct.
sure I, okay. Fair enough. What are you most proud of is my next question in your football career. You've done a lot of things. You've won a lot of championships. Um, you're one of the best, if not the best, women's quarterback in women's football history, in my opinion. So you've done a lot and accomplished a lot. But you personally, what are you most proud of that in your career?
Thank you for saying that.
Yeah,
Uh,
true.
this is the easiest question you have asked me. I am
Yeah.
most proud of the fact that in my 20-year career, I have missed one practice.
Mm.
Um, and it was in 2016.
What did you do?
I
How dare you miss a practice? What's wrong with you?
Yeah, so I broke my collarbone in the game and
Uh,
against Chicago, who would be, I
of
won't
course,
name
Chicago.
names.
Yeah.
A clean hit for sure.
Yeah.
And really my first big injury at that time.
Yeah.
And I had surgery on a Monday. We had practice Tuesday, and those meds just knocked me out. I was not fit to leave the house. However, I
Yeah.
redeemed myself because last year I had surgery on a torn Achilles that I suffered in the playoffs, and had surgery on a Tuesday morning and still made it to practice Tuesday night. So
You're like, you're
I've
not going to get
gotten
me this
tougher.
time.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. But like I said, I'm a process oriented person. My parents are blue collar people and they are not traditionally athletic. However, everything I learned about work ethic, punching the clock, being a reliable person, coworker, teammate, someone of your word, I attribute that all to them. I feel like I can't even remember either of them taking a sick day. I mean, I'm sure it happened, but my dad was a truck driver and my mom cleaned houses for, she's had a few different jobs, total worker bee, but I take a lot of pride in that, and I'd like to think I've helped establish that culture of work ethic. Um and kind of no days off, no shortcuts when you're trying to do something great. So easily, yeah, the one practice missed the one.
Ah.
Why didn't I? They should have just rolled me over there, drugged up and everything. I can't believe I missed.
Kept the perfect
Uh,
attendance.
yeah.
You know who that reminds me of? It reminds me of Julian Edelman. Julian Edelman was a college quarterback, and he obviously played receiver in the NFL, but he has a very similar upbringing from you. And then he had a dad that worked hard and taught him the value of hard work. And I mean, he's the Super Bowl MVP. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
he literally did so much with his small stature, and he's a legend for it. So,
Did
um,
you, not to interrupt you, but I
go
absolutely
ahead.
love this. It was in our like sort of local Boston.com recently
Huh?
that he was on a podcast or something, and he talked about how he briefly considered coming out of retirement, but he had to come to the realization that because of how hard the Patriots practiced, his body would not have been able to do it. Um, And I was like, that's amazing because even at the professional level, right? The NFL,
Yeah.
there's at least some kind of delta between what certain teams are putting in and what other teams aren't. And what I thought he was intimating was that like maybe if he didn't play for the Patriots, he could jump on with another team. But the intensity with which they practiced, he was like, I would take 3 reps and be done. Like my body couldn't handle it. And I just freaking ate that up with a spoon because
Yeah.
I'm like, yes, like that's what our team says about our practices versus certain games in terms of, for me, it's a little different. Quarterbacks get it easy at practice, but our O line with like one sub is getting no water breaks up and down the field, full team, no breaks, no subs. The D line's running in full on shifts of people, and they're like, we're still out here, at least in games when the defense is on the field, they get a break.
Yeah,
Ah,
that's funny. Um, what is your, I have to ask you about social media. So you didn't partake in social media for the longest. Then you recently joined Instagram. So I know you've talked about it a little bit, like, oh, I've heard all these horror stories and it hasn't even been that bad. But what has been your take about social media so far with your limited experience?
yeah, it's fine. I mean, I'm still trying to do it the way that feels comfortable to me. I mean, I avoided it for the longest time because I thought it was just sort of a vessel for self-promotion, which always kind of makes my skin crawl, and or people just spewing negative opinions and getting in fights and pointless keyboard
Petty stuff.
warrior stuff.
Yeah.
And I also thought it was a distraction. I I have a job that doesn't have me sitting in front of a computer all day or phone, so I'm kind of free from that by default a lot. But I'm like everybody else. I get in front of my phone and find myself just wasting time reading the same 4 websites, ESPN
Yeah.
and whatever
Yeah.
else. And I'm like, what am I doing? Like, I could be doing something else. So I thought that, I have goals, and I never had a goal to be better at social media or do more social media. So I'm big
Right.
on like, do your behaviors align with your goals? And if not, like one of them has to change, right? And my goals aren't going to change. So, however, you know, as I've sort of witnessed, like I said, I'm not in these rooms and people are making decisions about what's best for the league or the team. And I've always
Mhm.
thought my best contribution could be, be the best quarterback I can. Because if somebody comes to a game and sees good quarterback play, maybe they turn into a fan, spread the word, and that kind of chain reaction there, right?
Yeah.
But in different opportunities, sort of to be in front of little girls or hear through social media, my mom sending me a screenshot like, oh, this little girl's wearing your number down in Rhode Island because she came to a Renegades game and looks up to you kind of thing. I was like,
Very cool.
if I was a little girl and I knew there were grown women out there playing tackle football, like I didn't have female football heroes growing up. So
True.
I'm like, you know what? Maybe I can get in there and not do it and just post pictures of my cats who are adorable, I will say, but
Mhm.
and just present myself as a player for the Boston Renegades, as a professional quarterback, and see, if that helps the cause in any way for my team or the sport in general or for girls and women. So that's kind of how I'm trying to do it. Don't know how successful I've been or will be, but and trying not to just scroll endlessly and get mad at people posting dumb political stuff or something.
Yeah. It's not a great use of your time. I understand.
Yeah.
Um, we only have like 3 questions left. I appreciate you sticking around. So
No, I'm
the
enjoying our
injuries,
conversation.
good, good, good. So injuries, we've had collarbone and Achilles, right? Was there anything else that happened to you that was major?
Yeah, so in 2021, so the first championship against Minnesota,
Yeah.
I fucking tore a ligament in my shoulder on the last play of the first half. Um, and was able to keep playing, though we pretty much ran the ball the whole second half, which maybe some
Mhm.
people thought was tactical, but it was by necessity.
Yeah.
Um, and it really, it didn't feel like a big injury. If I didn't get an MRI and find out the extent of it, I probably wouldn't have known. Damn that orthopedic looking
Yeah.
at the
Yeah.
scan. And I had to have shoulder surgery in 2021 as well. So even all last year, I felt like I could barely throw the ball, the way I wanted to. And then, kind of got to a decent place with that late last year and then freakishly tore my Achilles. So this will actually be the first off season that I'm not rehabbing. I mean, I was rehabbing just that sort of those ran essentially back to back. It was in rehab for like 20 months.
Wow.
Um, yeah, but no pity party. I mean, I've been extraordinarily lucky, like those three, but I think I've
Besides that, you've been
missed.
very healthy. Yeah.
Yeah, and the way they've timed up even has been pretty advantageous. I haven't missed a lot of games. They've happened at the tail end of seasons. Get surgery as soon as possible, rehab through the off season and be ready at the start of the next season. But, a lot of my teammates haven't been so lucky. So 20 years in a contact sport,
It's
feeling,
not too bad.
yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
It could be worse. So my other
Yes.
question kind of is linked to that. Maybe it's the same answer, but I have to ask you, what's the most adversity you faced in your career? Was it those injuries or was it a certain game or a certain team or what would you
That's
say?
a good and difficult question. I mean, I would say the rehab, like,
Yeah.
lucky, fortunate for me, they weren't these like extremely painful, traumatic injuries on the field where you're getting taken off in an ambulance. We've certainly seen that plenty of times.
Yeah.
So the hard part of that was the rehab. It's just emotionally taxing, very tedious. It's a lot of time, money, effort. So that has been challenging, but you know, sort of cost of doing business really. It'd
Yeah.
be tough to make it through completely unscathed. But I think the adversity, honestly, is just the grind of trying to balance a full-time job and 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 like the way we do it. Like I said, we consider ourselves professional athletes and we're taking care of our bodies and watching our nutrition, prioritizing our recovery, doing as many things as we can think of, as many days and hours of the week. So just that balance is it's exhausting, and you're practicing 8 to 10 at night and have an hour commute home and turning around and working. I mean, a lot of us are in the same boat. And yeah, just I guess the toll of that and honestly the emotional toll. Like sometimes I'm like, I can't believe I'm still going to work on Monday after winning a championship at the Hall of Fame on ESPN2 on Saturday. I mean, more often than not, I'm just so grateful to be living out my 4-year-old self's dream. But every now and then I think the reality that I will never know my full potential just eats at me. It eats at me. 20 years at this, and I feel like I'm nowhere close to what I could be if I could have done it full time for those 20 years, or
It's tough to
whatever
swallow.
fraction of that would make up for having, pulled double duty for so long. And I wish I could know that. I wish that I was sitting in meetings bored because it's the, fourth hour of meetings that day alone. Like
Yeah.
I wish,
Mm.
did you watch that documentary on Netflix, Quarterback?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, and when Patrick Mahomes is like, he wins a game on Sunday, he's like, no matter what happens, I still got to go home and be a dad. And then they cut to him at this like farm that is very obviously been closed down for
Yeah.
his attendance there.
Right,
And he's
right,
just
right.
going around like shooting the apple gun and playing toss in the bucket or
Being
whatever.
normal. Yeah.
I'm like, and also like all the people that probably contributed to setting up that event, your publicist and your assistant. I'm like, okay, Patrick Mahomes, like, yeah, and I'm not saying those guys don't have an extremely hard job and don't work their absolute butts off. However, um, they have a few more resources at their disposal
A
to
few.
make the balance a
Yeah.
little more manageable.
Yeah. A few more resources is putting it mildly for sure.
Yeah.
So last two questions before you go. I want to hear your 2 cents on Team USA because I believe you've played played with Team USA and or tried out for Team USA. But I've heard through the grapevine the selection process is a little bit wonky. I don't know how they're picking. I don't know if it's friendships or politics or. So I just want to hear straight from you, your opinion of Team USA and how they choose their team, and you know, your experience with them.
Yeah, another thing I don't have an educated opinion about because I did
Oh,
try out. Was that last year? Yes.
yeah.
Yes. I went to the tryouts and I was cut. I didn't make the team. So I was not in the room when those selections were being made. So I don't know how that goes, but the only takeaway I have is that, I wasn't good enough. What other reason do you make a team or not make a team?
Huh.
There were other athletes, my own teammates included, who didn't make it, and then some awesome ones who did, and was psyched for the people on the Renegades who made it. And it sounds like they had a great experience. Um, and of course, our international players who played for their respective
Yeah.
countries.
Yeah.
Sounds like, and Molly has played in the past, Molly, our owner.
Mhm.
So, like I said, it seems like it's a great experience for those folks, but I was not one of them, so can't speak too much of it.
That's a very diplomatic answer. So you're telling me that you as a competitor or cut from the team, didn't make the team, and you just thought, well, I guess I'm not good enough. I'm happy for the people that are going. Sounds like they had a good time, and that's the end of it. Or is that what you're willing to say on my podcast? Like, is that
Yeah,
how
I
you truly
mean,
felt? You know what I'm saying?
yeah,
Like,
yeah. I mean, I, I try not to yuck someone's yum, right? And my teammates had an awesome experience, so I'm not going to go around bad mouthing something
of
that was
course.
really awesome
Oh
for
yeah,
other
yeah,
people. And like I said, I wasn't in the room. There was lots of people who tried out, and a fraction of them made it. Like you said about St. Louis showing up to play us, like you don't show up thinking you're going to lose. Did I show up thinking I was going to get cut? I mean, no, I wouldn't have probably gone otherwise, right? Like
yeah. Right.
I wanted to be on the team. I wanted to share my
Experience.
football experience with a lot of people who, come from teams that haven't had the same level of success or longevity or whatever.
Yeah.
And yeah, there were a lot of compelling reasons to want to do it. But I didn't make it. However, I will say that it was the first time I tried out because historically, um, it has the tournament has been during our season. There's like an extra kind of layoff in the playoffs,
Yeah.
like an extra bye week. And I
Yeah.
was like, I'm not risking injury, um, in, the worlds or whatever it's called, and putting my team at risk for me not to be available. Like to me, that just felt like a very skewed risk reward ratio.
Yeah.
But they moved it to after the season. So, had some conversations with people and was like, you know what? I think it makes sense to do it this year. But I will say, what I was about to say is that I do feel like I have played with and against the best football players in the world by
Yeah.
playing for the Boston Renegades in the WFA, in the East specifically. So, you know, I'm happy that I can say that. So,
Fair
yeah.
enough.
But you would have to ask people that were part of the decision-making process,
Okay. Appreciate it.
about the cuts themselves.
All right. All right. Fair enough. Last question, Allison, before we go. Um, since you are from the same generation as me, I turned 42 this year, and I've kind of like it's not about me, but I'm trying to like be healthier and lose some weight, and I don't want to become Andy Reid, so I'm going to the gym and putting in the work, and um, that's what I'm doing at my age. So for you at your career after playing 20 years, my question for you is, how do you know when it is time to hang it up for yourself? Like, is it declining of like your physical ability? Is it because you love playing, you love football, you love the process, you love Boston, you love like you love so many things about it. I feel like they'd have to kind of like make you stop playing because you wouldn't do it. You know what I'm saying?
Mm.
With all due respect. So how do you know, or you don't really know maybe you don't know the answer, and you're just taking it year by year.
Yeah, I mean, I would say year by year because
Okay.
I mean, just mathematically, right? Like sometimes I'll joke with people like, oh, I figure I'm about halfway through my career at this point. But I know, of course, that's not true.
Yeah.
But I factor a few things into the equation. One, of course, do I still love it? Do I enjoy it? Is it worth the time, effort, sacrifice? And
Yeah.
that's always been a slam dunk for sure.
Yeah.
Two, I don't know how many people who can say they knew what they wanted to be when they were 4 years old and they're actually doing it, you know?
True. True.
Um, and and like why would I give up on that dream? 20 years is an extremely long time in football, but I hope at the end of the day it's a fraction of my life, right? I want to live to be like 100 and be like,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, that 20 years flew by.
Yeah. Yeah.
Other things, can I still give to and get from the game? I would never kind of hold my team hostage if I was a liability and they were just feeling sorry for me and just kept me around because, they were too polite to tell me it was time to go. Other things like, will I regret missing out on the things that football makes you miss out on, like career choices, for example. Like I used to want to be a commercial airline pilot and thought that I would go in the military to do that. And, there are age restrictions on when you can start and finish that in the military. And that has come and gone for me.
Yeah.
And at this point in time, do I look back and say, man, I should have done that. I should have stopped playing football and pursued that. I've never come away with any qualms about the decisions that I've made to continue playing football. And I feel good about that because I think regret is something that's really hard. Um, it just kind of is there and eats at you. And I try to, be thoughtful with my decisions so that I don't enter kind of regret territory.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know. I haven't felt close. Like I've never been kind of on the fence, but I
Yeah.
for sure would say like, I know I'm playing this year. Beyond that, I don't know. And that's not being wishy-washy. And I'll never be that person who makes it a guessing game. Like, I don't know, maybe I will, maybe I won't. And, cryptic stuff online and all that crap. Like when I decide the people who need to know and should know will know, and I'm not going to make a big freaking show about it one way or the other or announce my triumphant return or any of that self-indulgent
Yeah. Yeah.
nonsense.
I've picked
So
that up about you. I can tell that that's not your style.
I'm glad. I hope so. I'm like, now that I'm on social media, do people think I'm just like the rest of them? Self-promotion left and right.
No.
Oh man, makes my skin crawl. Hmm.
Well, fair enough. I appreciate your time, Allison. The interview was a little bit longer than what like usually I try to keep it to an hour just so I'm respectful of people's time. But I had so many questions for you, it just naturally went a little bit longer. And so it sounds like you didn't mind. And so I'm really appreciative of your time. And I'll be releasing this podcast probably Friday or Saturday. So I'll just send you a link, to your Instagram, and then you
Ugh.
can
I just learned you can't put a link in your caption. I tried to do that the other day and I was clicking it, nothing happens.
you're
So I had
learning
to
it.
call in the pros, like, what am I doing wrong? It's like I'm a kindergartner.
Yeah, it's funny.
Uh,
But yeah, I appreciate your time. You're amazing. I think the world of you as a human and as a football player. And so I'm stoked that you're going to be back next year. And maybe this is far-fetched, but maybe someday you'll be able to play Texas in like a women's Super Bowl, like where the champion plays a champion at a neutral location. If we get the funding, I don't know. It's kind of like a dream of mine. And so maybe I can make those things happen. But obviously, money is a big part of that. It has to make sense
yeah.
for both sides. So we'll see what we can do. But for the meantime, keep on doing what you're doing. I'm a huge fan of you in every way that I can be. And let me know if you ever need anything.
Thank you. And sorry on my end for going long. I tend to be
No, no,
long-winded at
no.
times, but
I
it's
had too
like
many
one of my
questions.
favorite things to talk about. So, you know, conversation goes where it goes. But I appreciate you. And I meant what I said. Like, there's a lot of people, and that you encounter who give you that courtesy, like, oh, you play women's football. And then there are fewer others that kind of actually invest. And sometimes that's pretty short-lived. And then there are others who stick around and contribute in multiple ways. And you're one of those people, and I really do appreciate it. Like, it's awesome. Like, we certainly need male allies, and not to make it a gender thing, but it
Yeah.
kind of takes a village. So thank you for what you're doing too.
You're very welcome. It's my pleasure. We'll talk to you
Awesome.
soon.
Yeah, I hope your Browns have a good year. If not, you always got Ohio State, right? I see the backup t-shirt.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny because I'm an Ohio State fan and a Browns fan, but I love the Browns. I'm an Ohio State fan, but I love the Browns way more than Ohio State. But Ohio State always wins. So it'd be much more convenient for me to be an Ohio State
Right,
fan.
right, right.
But
Hey,
you
we
don't
love
choose
who we love.
you don't choose who you love. Exactly.
All
But I'll talk to you soon.
right, Terry, take care. Thanks again.
Appreciate you.
Likewise, bye.
See ya.